Hello, everyone. Thank you for joining us today on another wonderful Enterprise Sage podcast. Today we have Mr. Joe Price, the CEO and founder of Intentional Achievements. He's been achieving a lot of things with a lot of intention for multiple decades and helping people achieve that as well. Welcome, Joe. Thank you for being here today.
Thanks so much for having me on, Craig.
You got into the industry that you're doing somehow. How did you get into the industry?
Great question. I started by answering an ad in the newspaper for a salesperson for Dale Carnegie Training. And I'm sure you've heard that company before. Uh, and I started work as a salesperson for them, but got very interested in Dale Carnegie principles and actually teaching Dale Carnegie training programs. Had a 15-year career with them and then had what Michael Gerber calls the entrepreneurial seizure, where I said, what am I doing this for them for when I can do it myself? And that's when I started my first training company in 1998.
Training. So how do you keep people on track with training? Yes, that was a joke, folks. But
Yeah.
the type of training that you focus on, how would you describe that?
Well, I believe that behavior modification happens in four stages: motivation, education, training, and coaching. So we have to have a reason to do what we do, and that motivation sort of kicks us in the butt in order to do what we to start doing what we want to do. We only can do what we know. So if we want to change something that we're doing, we have to be educated about something different. But we know, and studies have shown, that education doesn't change performance. Just because we know something doesn't mean we necessarily do it. So we need some training to take that education and learn how to put it into practice. Now, once we start practicing it, it doesn't mean that we do it well. And so we need a coach to help us take that skill we're developing and make it better over time.
Okay, so I'm guessing that you've had the opportunity to work with small companies, big companies, as well as individuals. Is that a reasonable assumption?
That's reasonable.
Okay. So most business owners are incredibly busy, right? It's the fires. Sometimes the business owner can be the arsonist and the fire department at the same time.
Right?
So with most owners being really busy, but many still feel disconnected from where they actually want their life to go. How do you think that happens?
Several things. One, progress or movement doesn't mean productive, right? So just because things are happening doesn't mean they're happening well. And it also doesn't mean that they're happening to the degree that we wanted them to happen. All of us started business for a reason. We have a purpose in mind. And I think a lot of independent business owners sort of lose track of that over time because we get so reactionary about the fires that we're putting out that we lose sight of the reason that we started the business to begin with.
So a good lesson is activity is not necessarily productivity.
It really is true. So you have to always come back to some key questions. Why did I originally start the business? Is what I'm doing today intentional steps in order for me to get to that place? And then also, we have a tendency to focus on just the business and not our whole life, right? We didn't start a business because we wanted another job that we wanted to go to. We wanted to put it in perspective to our whole life, right? We have 9 different areas of our life, the way that intentional achievements divides it up. Our business is only one part of that. And so we have a tendency to lose sight of why did I start the business and what effect does everything that I do in my business have on the rest of my life in order for me to fulfill my life's purpose.
You use the word intentional, and it's in your company name, intentional achievement. So you talk about intentional living instead of
Correct.
reactive living.
Right.
What's the difference between a business owner building something intentionally versus just surviving or existing, just keeping the lights on?
So we have a tendency to react to the things that happen to us every day. A problem that arises, we stop everything that we were doing before in order to solve that problem or put out that fire. One of the challenges is when we get into firefighting mode, we have a tendency to create fires in other parts of the business or in other parts of our life because we're not taking that business or our life as a whole system where each component interacts with every other piece of the system. And so we have a tendency, our definition about reaction is very important to this conversation because a reaction is an out of control action based on an outside stimulus, right? So whatever we do in reaction mode, we
Mhm.
are actually in um, out of control and giving that control over whatever we're reacting to, which is the opposite of being intentional, being purposeful, designing and defining and aligning our actions to our purpose, values, and vision.
Okay, so one thing I see a lot with business owners that we talk to is they've often built a company, but not necessarily a life. How do you help people recognize that things are disconnected?
Yeah, so the first thing I ask people to do is to get very aware of where their time is going. Because when we start really reflecting on where our time is going, we're starting to see certain patterns. And if we're spending 50, 60, 70% of our time firefighting or dealing with things in our business, that only leaves 30% of our time for the other 8 areas of our life. And so we have to take a look at where our time is going and why is it going there. The second thing is, what was the reason we started the business to begin with, right? Did we start it in order to create some freedom and some higher purpose in our life? Or did we start it just to have another job where we're our own boss, right? And so if we started it to create something larger than ourselves and something that incorporates in our whole life to make our life more fulfilled, but we're not spending time in the other areas of our life, something's off.
Interesting introspective there. Oh, so why do you think so many people still feel frustrated or overwhelmed or just unfulfilled even after they've achieved the financial success? I mean, it's a measuring stick, but it's not the only. Why do you think people feel just um, something's missing?
Yeah, because achievement doesn't necessarily equate to fulfillment, right? So I believe that all of us have a overall purpose for being here in our life. And a lot of us start our business as a vehicle to help us fulfill that purpose. But if we lose sight of the purpose and we're only in it for the achievement, then we become disconnected from that overall purpose. Excuse me. And we focus more on the vehicle than we do on the purpose that we started the vehicle for.
Okay. And some of the information that I've that you shared with me that I've read, um, you used the word harmony. So, or harmony not in balance, I think is what it was. That really connected with me because most owners feel balance is impossible. whether it's the work-life balance or whatever else it might be. Uh, Explain what harmony really means in in the space that you coach people in.
Yeah, so balance sort of unconsciously means that equal time and equal focus on the various things that we're trying to balance. It's impossible to balance if we're sleeping 5, 6, 7, 8 hours a day, working 5, 6, 7, 8 hours a day, and we only have 4 or 5 or 6 hours left in the day for the other 7 or 8 areas of our life, right? So it's impossible to spend equal time. Harmony means that everything blends together and works together in order for the fulfillment to be achieved. So I don't need to spend 5 hours of time doing something if I can spend 1 hour in more quality time in that area and make sure that it harmonizes with the rest of the areas of my life. It's sort of like if you listen to music, and music has dissonance and it has consonance or it has harmony. There's a beauty to that harmony where everything comes together and fits together perfectly, even though every instrument is playing their own tune at their own time. It blends together to create this beautiful sound. And that's what harmony does to our life. It blends together all 9 areas of our life in order to create this consonance, this beauty that just feels right.
That takes intention and work to get to. It's almost like the next level. It's so in your experience, what's the biggest obstacle holding business owners back from that next level?
There's a couple of things. One, they're not intentional about creating harmony, right? So they don't think of it in those terms. The second thing is that as we're building that harmony, there has to be communication to all of the individual components in that life. So for example, I have to communicate with my primary relationship. I have to communicate with my family. I have to communicate with my friends about what I'm doing, why I'm doing it, how they feel about it, and how together we can create that harmony so someone doesn't feel like they're being left out. So the communication with the individual components becomes extremely important.
Okay, I got it. That makes sense. So with businesses, I'm just thinking of businesses that grow and they grow beyond their owner. It just sometimes that happens. How much business growth is actually leadership growth?
The business can grow past the owner, but then it becomes a challenge because the owner is no longer leading the business. The business is leading them, which means they're now in reaction mode trying to catch up. So we have to develop intentionally our leadership, our emotional intelligence, our courage and our fortitude, our systems and processes that we build into the business so that the business grows at the pace that we wanted it, for the purpose that we wanted it, and not become personally dependent on us. What I see a lot of times happen with business owners is they feel like everything has to go through them because they're the expert, they know what's going on, they have to be in total control. That stifles the growth of the business and it never allows it to fulfill its ultimate purpose, which was the reason to start the business to begin with. So we as leaders have to have the emotional intelligence to realize everything doesn't depend on us. The sixth driver in the intentional success system is the right people at the right time doing the right thing at the right reason. So we have to have people inside the business that we pull together as a team, doing their individual part, creating a harmonious system within the business that grows at the pace that the team and the systems that were established are able to grow.
You're bringing a couple things to mind. One is the people closest to the problem are usually the closest person to the solution, no matter what aspect it is in business. And the other one is the Peter principle that people rise to their level of incompetency and they get
Correct?
to a certain point and they just can't go any further. And that's where leaders have to grow through information so the business doesn't grow beyond them, but also as they grow, they have to be comfortable leaving things behind that they don't need to be the person that goes out and fix that machine. Or
Exactly.
it's comes down to their best use of time. So
Right.
many
And,
owners.
and again, if the business becomes personally dependent on us all the time,
Mhm.
we haven't created a scalable business. We've created a job where we are our own boss.
Yeah, one where you can't get promoted because you're taking care of the little things.
That's it.
I'm just thinking many owners they're just incredible operators, right? They know how all the things work, but emotionally reactive under pressure because somebody's got to make a decision. So how important is the emotional intelligence to scaling a business?
Well, according to the studies, emotional intelligence can contribute up to 78% of our overall success. So I believe it's extremely important for us to develop our emotional intelligence over time. The second piece of that is understanding who we are and where we fit inside the organization and what roles we play. So, for example, I believe that when someone starts a business, they have the entrepreneurial seizure and they're starting it with the mindset of, I'm a specialist, I do my job very well. And they think because they do the job very well that they can build a business as a result of that. And very quickly they realize being a specialist doesn't mean that they can do every aspect of what it takes to build a business. So, in our small business owner program that we've developed, we help people develop 4 different mindsets that are required for a business owner to build that business to the scale that they wanted it. So, they start with the specialist, I'm really good at this job.
Mm-hmm.
Then they have to build a manager mindset to where they start to establish systems and processes in the business that start to scale as the business grows so it doesn't become personally dependent on me, the specialist. I also begin to hire people and teach them those systems and processes and put them in places where they can shine. And I manage that system and process as the business continues to grow. Then I put on a leader mindset or a leader hat that says, I need to build the people in my business. And I also need to see where the limitations are of the business and the people that are there. Then I need to develop an entrepreneur mindset that says, where in this industry does this business grow? What are the trends? What are the possibilities? What risks do I have to take in order to make decisions that will help that business scale in that particular industry? If we miss any one of those mindsets, we are doomed to a business that stays small and
Mm-hmm.
still becomes personally dependent on us.
Yeah, I was just thinking how processes develop within a organization. It's kind of somebody just starts to figure it out, and oftentimes those processes are not documented. But where you do have process documentation, where you have a process, you can have continuous process improvement. And the owner who starts off as that technician, then they develop the process, then they develop the training, Any comments on when owners hire people like themselves?
That's the challenge that we have because we think if we hire people just like us, then the business will grow the way we want it to grow. And I ask business owners all the time, if they were to create a team of people, they had a project that they wanted to bring to fruition. They had the authority to build a team of people to bring that project to its logical conclusion. Would they hire people exactly like themselves? And 9 out of 10 say no. And I say, why? They say because they would miss certain pieces or certain aspects or certain ways of looking at that problem that they don't have. And so the biggest challenge that we have is the diversity of the teams that we put together. And that also becomes the biggest strength that we have as the diversity of the team that we put together. It's that good, bad challenge when you put any team together. But I would take a diverse team and the challenges that creates, then creating a team just like me and then miss opportunities because I didn't see them.
I'm just thinking of a couple things, Joe, where you got business owners that are the perfectionist, and it has to be done exactly their way,
Right,
even though there could be other ways to do it or better ways to do it, but it has to be done their way.
right.
And how that can it can just limit a business, and it limits the revenues, it limits the profits, it limits the potential sale because if you eventually want to sell it as part of the retirement structure, it's worth less because that institutional knowledge is just missing in the organization. That's
Yeah. And I
yeah.
find that both for entrepreneurs and small business owners, I find it in Fortune 1000 and 100 companies at the same time, where the managers think that the only way to do it is their way. There are a couple of reasons for that. Number one, because the manager actually believes their way is the best way. But there are some other things as well. In larger organizations, they're actually trying to protect the value that they bring to the organization, because if they're not the end all be all, then they're worthless and they're afraid that they're going to lose their job, right? The
Yeah.
challenge with that is that we don't get a variety of perspectives. So I ask people, what's more important, getting the job done and getting the job right, or getting the job done the way I want it done?
Yeah, just think of the way owners, as you described it, they're the technician, then they build some people around them, and then they're part of the team. And then over time, they have to be separate from that team, and they're the player coach on the team. And then then they're just the coach, and then it's like, look, you just have to be the leader, and you might want to play on the team, but your best use of time is being the leader of the organization and coaching the team how to be effective. It happens by accident, but with your resources, there's the opportunity to have it by intention.
It's true. And
Um,
that's the biggest challenge that leaders go through, whether it's in large organizations or in startup businesses.
mhm.
That's the reason that we created a program called Leadership Transformation, because we find that people who are highly skilled and highly technical when they start the business, that's the reason that they believe they're the only ones that can make the decisions and do the job, because they're the specialist. And so when they start hiring people and start building a team, that mentality is still there. The second part of that mentality is they, as the specialist or as the team member, they feel a part of everything. They're accepted at that level.
Mhm.
When they grow to a first line supervisor or a leader of that team, they feel disconnected. And so they have difficulty in transforming into a leader because they want to still stay the buddy of everybody on the team,
Right.
but then it limits their ability to be seen as the leader and be able to coach and manage the things that need to happen. There are transformational conditions, so to speak, that have to be addressed. For example, one of the four foundational principles of the intentional success system is our comfort zone. And we don't take into account our comfort zone a lot of times. We feel uncomfortable at that new position, and we don't know how to address it because we're never trained in how to enlarge our comfort zone and take on that new position and feel comfortable in it. We're also not trained how to communicate to the people that we used to be buddies with. Now I'm your manager, now I'm your leader, and that communication starts to break down. So we've got a comfort zone issue, we've got a communication issue. And the third piece is the people skills piece that a lot of people don't take into account as well. They think when there's a problem in a team, it's always communication. Dale Carnegie taught that there are two sides of the same coin. We have the people skills on one side of the coin and our communication skills on the other side of the coin, and we have to improve both in order to make that transformation.
Reminds me of books I've read and books I've given to others on first-time managers, right? Versus don't just jump in. It's you're not doing the same job, right? You're doing it a little bit differently, and a little bit of education goes a long way. It kind of leads me to the next one of just vision, right? What happens inside of a company when the owner lacks clarity of purpose or vision? It's kind of like driving in the fog, and something's going to happen.
Right.
So what happens with that when there's a lack of clarity and purpose?
We have a tendency, if we don't have vision or purpose, we have a tendency to react to everything that happens. When we're reacting, it's like driving while keeping our eyes on the rearview mirror, right? We're always looking behind us, afraid of something that happened that we have to fix right away. And so we're always motivated by fear. We're always running from the last problem to the new problem that we have created because we have not addressed something in the future that should have been seen by our purpose and our vision. So the first three drivers of the intentional success system happens to be constancy to purpose, applied values, and clear vision. So we have to have a reason for what we do and why we do it. We have to align ourselves with our value system that help us make decisions in tough times. So we're not reacting to situations, but we have a clear decision mechanism based on our value system. And then we always have that clear vision that we're heading to, like the lighthouse in the storm,
Mm-hmm.
that guides us to the place that we're going.
Uh, Probably too many times I've seen owners, the company just outgrows their technical expertise. Um, Sometimes they can feel threatened by the people they brought in, just because they took a different track in life. And it's the sometimes that the business can outgrow the emotional maturity of the founder. Do you see that too?
I do, and it's because of what we talked about just a minute ago, and that is we lose sight of our purpose and our values and our vision,
Yeah.
right? Why did we start the business to begin with? Is it in alignment with the values that we hold? And do we have a really clear picture of where we're heading? Now, that picture can change as the business grows, right? The vision, the industry may change. There may be some new trends, or there may be a new opportunity that we hadn't seen before. That's the reason why we have to keep that entrepreneurial mindset or that entrepreneurial hat. At times, we have to stop and say, where am I? Where was I? Has the goalpost moved? Has the vision changed? Has the industry that I'm in changed enough to where I need to move that vision a little bit and then compare where that vision was to where I want it to be, and then decide what do I have to do in order to move that vision to the new place.
It reminded me a couple things here. There's a book out there, What You Say When You Talk to Yourself, right? Most people don't do that intentionally, they do it accidentally.
And 95% of the time we speak negatively to ourselves instead of
Right.
positively. So
Negative reinforcement instead of positive. That's again that book's What to Say When You Talk to Yourself. It's a great little book. How does intentional leadership affect the culture, employee retention, team alignment, quality? How does it impact all of those?
if that vision is not kept forefront in the mind of the leader and then forefront in the communication to the company and the employees, we will all lose sight of him, right? So there's an intention which says, here's what I want. But then there's the intentional actions that we have to be engaged in day by day that says, this is what I want, this is how we're going to get it, and this is the reason why. Because a lot of times we get so fixated on the vision, we lose sight of the purpose, right? So those things have to harmoniously blend together that says, guys, here's where we're going, but let's not forget why we're going in that direction and why we started this to begin with. And then what do we have to do in order to keep that forefront? A lot of the companies that I've worked with, they create this wonderful vision and mission. It becomes a poster on the wall or something that they said in a meeting one time and then they put it in a drawer and forget it. It has to be part and parcel of who we are, how we communicate, and how we build that team.
You're just prompting some thoughts here. You've got the entrepreneur, they were working someplace else and they probably felt like a prisoner in the job, right? It's paycheck to
Exactly.
paycheck, saving what they could do, and they didn't want that, right? They wanted to have a place of their own. Well, what happens is they just traded one prison for another prison, and it's their own prison, and they're in their
Absolutely.
own prison, and they're their own keeper.
Yes.
Why do so many owners become that prisoner of the business they've created?
Because they lose sight of the things that we just talked about. They lose sight of the reason why they started the business to begin with. But it comes back to something that I mentioned before. Are they starting it because they're running away from something that they don't like?
Yeah.
Or are they starting because they're running towards something that they want to create? There's only two directions that we can run. We're either running from or running to. And the key for us and the intentional part of this whole thing is I've got to know specifically what I'm running to and keep that in mind the whole time. Because the more we focus on what we're running from, we, as I tell a lot of entrepreneurs, and we do coaching, for example, in addiction recovery. And
Hmm.
believe it or not, I find the same mentality in addiction recovery that I do a lot of times in entrepreneurs. We substitute one addiction for another. We constantly run from our addiction to another addiction. We run from something that we don't like in the company that we are running from, but inadvertently we create the same routines or same challenges in the new business that we're creating.
You reminded me of a couple other sayings that when I'm talking to people about they're changing jobs or changing careers, I ask them that question: Are you running from something or to something? And it just causes them to pause. The other one is the grass is always greener on the other side of the fence until you have to mow it and do the same thing. It's like,
Exactly.
you know what? Maybe I'm okay where I'm at. It
I
just
use the same analogy.
it just causes pause, and then they self-evaluate. Why am I really leaving? And am I going someplace that's going to be different, or am I just hoping it's going to be different, but it's really the same?
Right? Or am I going to be intentional about creating it to be
You
different?
know, um, business owners have a lot of stress, right? Just because all the things that they have a lot of stress because they're solving problems all day long, but a lot of them like to solve problems all day long. So whether it's business problems, technical problems, people problems, whatever it is, there's always that stuff going on. So how do you help leaders move from just being reactionary to intentional under stress? How do you
It's
help
a
them do that?
Yeah, it's a great question. And I start where I start with everything because I believe that definitions are the most important things that we can focus on. And you go, wait a minute, why definitions? I believe definitions dictate our actions. Whatever we want to do in or with a subject, that action is determined by our definition. Let me give you an example. If I say the word stress to 10 people, 9 out of 10 would want less stress in their life instead of more. Would you agree that's true?
Sure. Okay.
Okay.
Yeah.
Now, the reason for that is the definition that they have for the term stress. Because, and here's what I asked them, when you and I go to the gym, let me rephrase that. When you go to the gym and you do curls for your biceps, what are you doing to the muscle?
Stressing. Yeah.
You're stressing the muscle. And if you do it correctly, two things happen: growth and strength. If you look the word stress up in the dictionary, it's only a 3-word definition: a reason for action or a compelling force. So the definition is neutral. It's we who input whether stress is negative or positive. So first, I say, tell me the stress that you're under and tell me the impact that stress is having on you. Now I work on changing the definition and say, what if that stress produced growth and strength for you in the business? Would you approach that stress differently? Would you
Yeah.
handle it differently?
Yeah.
If you handled it differently, would the impact be different?
It's kind of how you're prompting how people can just react emotionally, or they can intentionally say, all right, is that a problem that needs to be solved right now? And do I have to solve it?
Yes,
Or is somebody else closer to the problem? They're probably closer to the solution, and it doesn't need an answer right now. If the answer shows up tomorrow or next week, okay, that's okay. So the first thing is slow the process down,
correct.
understand what's going on to it. Don't just react. Prioritize by time, by impact, and through leverage of others.
Right.
Well, okay.
And what you're describing is the process that we teach of how to go from being reactionary to being responsive and then being intentional. So there's a 3-step process. Something happens to us, we immediately react emotionally to that situation. And most of the time, the outcome is going to be worse than if we would have stopped, take a breath, and responded in that same situation. Well, what makes the difference between reacting and responding? Two things: thought and control.
Mm-hmm.
So I have to stop, I have to breathe, I have to think, I have to decide, do I handle this now? Is it something that I can delegate to someone? Is it something that needs to be solved at all? Sometimes we react to a problem where it doesn't need to be handled because it will handle itself. Now, what we're missing is the third phase, which is the intentional action phase, right? And you and I ride motorcycles, and you might remember in motorcycle training the 3-second rule and the 12-second rule,
Mm-hmm.
right?
Yep.
You look 3 seconds ahead, which allows you to respond to something rather than react. But if you look 12 seconds ahead, you anticipate a problem and you take intentional action in order to eliminate or minimize the negative effect of something that may be occurring. So, what we have a tendency to do is miss the intentional action piece where we step back and say, let me analyze what's going on here. What can I anticipate be problems that might occur? And what intentional actions can I take before it occurs so that I don't have to choose whether I'm going to react or respond when it actually happens?
You're prompting some other thoughts here, Joe. So at Enterprise Sage, we often talk about how business owners and their business is their largest asset. We see it time and time again. Many don't know what the value of that business is, but how many owners manage it emotionally instead of strategically. So they see the top line revenue, great, I must be making more profit. It's not always working out that way. Sometimes it's working out the opposite part of it. So how does intentional thinking change or have the opportunity to change the enterprise value? Besides
And
processes, right? So process is part of it.
very
What
true.
what are other ways that it can enhance the enterprise value?
But we're going to build the business intentionally. If we're building it intentionally, we build it for a purpose, overall purpose of why we started the business to begin with. But part of that purpose is what's the end result? Are we building it for a legacy? Are we building it to add enough value to where we want to sell it? Are we building it so that it has enough individual components to where we can break it up and create other things as a result? So when we think of purpose, we think two purposes. One, overall, what was the overall reason for me starting this business? Intentional achievements. I want to change millions of lives to be more intentional and to feel more fulfilled as a result of that. That's the first larger purpose. But the underlying purpose is, what do I want to do with that business over time? Do I want to build it as a legacy that continues? And then I have to build a structure internally and I have to build people internally to be able to take it over? Or am I building it to where there's a date at the end where I say, I fulfilled everything that I want to fulfill. I'm going to take everything out of it and then do stage 2 of my life or stage 5 of my life. So that secondary purpose determines what I do internally to create the structures necessary to get the end result.
Do you think owners actually have that clarity around what they actually want their business to do for their life?
Most don't start it that way. Most start it with an entrepreneurial seizure running from where they were,
Okay.
right? And so our job to help small business owners is, number one, change the direction that they're looking from running from backwards to forwards, running to, and then helping them create some clarity around that, what that to looks like.
I'm just recalling why, after retiring again, I had the intentional desire to start an organization that is now known as Enterprise Sage. It's to help business owners achieve more than they knew what was possible. So they're at X and they wanted to go to X plus. And working with them, well, you can go to X plus 3 or X plus 4. Here's how you can get there. And then, God, there's so many businesses that get listed. 60% of businesses that are listed for sale never sell.
Yeah.
And the owner thought it was going to be their retirement plan. And they didn't extract wealth out along the way. So they're just disadvantaging themselves. And that's why we started Enterprise Age. It's to help
Right.
business owners out in so many ways.
Yeah.
One thing we see often is owners building revenue, not building transferable value. And there's a difference, right? So revenue is revenue. Transferable value is processes, it's systems, it's culture. Um, how does intentional planning help avoid that trap of just building revenue
Yeah.
and not building transferable value?
So we come back to definitions again. So we start with, you asked about planning. So planning, I asked business owners that I work with, what's the most important skill that an individual needs to be a good planner? And what would you say that skill is?
Um, well, the ability to pause, step back from, as I call it, the tree bark and the tree and realize they're in a forest.
Right?
Take the time to develop the plan, do the analysis, but they've got to take themselves out of the hot seat every day, day after day, because you can't develop and execute a plan when you're constantly the fireman. And that's where I look for some entrepreneurs that you're the arsonist who's
That's
setting the
right.
fire and you're getting the emotional reward from putting out the fire, but you're the one who set the fire. So you're literally
Exactly.
getting in your own way.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah. Well, and I look at it this way, planning is very simple. It's understanding where we are, where we're going, and what's necessary in order to get from where we are to where we're going. So we have to be very clear on the two endpoints. And so the skill that I believe that's most important for planning to start is being a good visioneer, right? Because if you don't have a clear understanding where you're going, how can you put a plan together? Right? So you can have all of the logistical skills and all of the understanding of step by steps, but where are they getting you? And so if we don't have a clear picture of where we're going and a clear picture of where we are, then putting the steps together is going to get us from nowhere to nowhere, right?
going around the racetrack, right? Expecting something different, but ending up in the
Exactly.
same place. It's kind of like entrepreneurs that I mentioned are the arsonist and the fire department. They do not know first, they're not doing it intentionally.
Correct.
And second, oftentimes they don't even know they're doing it.
Not at all.
And it
Right.
just and they just get stuck in this rut of round and round. Yeah.
Well, and it comes to the four quadrants of time management, right? Urgent, important, important, not urgent, right? So the arsonist spends most of their time in quadrant number one, putting out fires, right? But the more time they spend putting out fires, the more time they start creating fires because they're not addressing the important issues that need to be addressed while they're putting out these older fires. So we have to help people move from quadrant one, quadrant three and four, more toward quadrant two, which is focusing on the important, not the urgent.
Okay. So, all right, that takes me to how important is alignment between the personal vision and the business strategy? And do you
So
typically see them aligned or disconnected?
I see them disconnected because most people are not, as you and I both know, the concept systems thinkers, right? We are hardwired into binary thinking. It's either this way or that way. And if we become a little bit more knowledgeable, a little bit more intelligent, we become linear thinkers and we look step by step from one step to the next. The challenge with that is we never see the interconnected nature of all of the various steps. We're taught for the last 400 years in a reductionist problem solving mentality to where we think when we have a problem, we take a look at the problem, we isolate it from the rest of the system, fix that problem, and then think everything is going to be fine. The challenge is we have a fixed issue, different from what it was before, put back into a system that it doesn't know how to react to the rest of the system, causing reactionary impulses in all the various natures of the other components of the system. And so what is important to me is to get business people to become more systems oriented, more systems thinking, and say, okay, yes, this is not aligned. I'm not going to take this out and fix it because I don't know what impact it's going to have when I put it back into the system. So now I say, all right, if you do this to this area, how is it going to affect this area over here and this area over here? And what effect is that impact going to have for those areas? Because when we think we're aligning, we're causing misalignment in all the other areas that we're trying to address.
Yeah, I'm thinking binary and linear thinking to fix that one problem, but you're putting it back into a broken system because there was not nonlinear thinking applied to the rest of the system.
Yeah, correct.
And that's where the owner's got to just stop, just slow the process down, take the time to figure out how how else is it going to impact, and identify the 3 to 4 likely problems that it's going to impact. It's kind of like when software is released. Okay, they fixed this one bug in the software, but it created 10 others.
Absolutely
Okay,
correct.
that's good. That's what good software testing does, but
Right.
not everybody does that.
Well, we do
Um,
it the same thing in our health, right? We go and get a cream for a rash on our arm and think that the problem is solved, but we haven't addressed the underlying root cause of the problem, and it comes back or it comes back in a different place. So we try a different solution, and that solution causes other problems within the system of our overall health. And I mean, we hear it all the time. Here's this medication that's going to solve this problem. And then for 3 minutes in a very low voice, but it causes these side effects, right? Very low voice. We don't want you to deal with that, right? But
yeah.
a lot of times that's what we do in business.
We see it a lot because we look at all the aspects of the business, the personal situation, everything that's going on, right? So we see this where we see cases where we improve how the owner sees things, and that dramatically impacts the financial outcomes of the business. But that's what Enterprise Sage is all about. Do you see it in the coaching aspect of it, where you're working with the person individually, and it starts to have a financial impact on their business?
In both directions, right? Uh, and I was coaching a couple who started a business themselves. He had his own business, she had her own business, but they wanted to start this business together. And one of the things that I found very quickly, you talked about alignment before, is that they were not aligned in their understanding of number one. They understood why they wanted to start the business, but they were not aligned in what their individual roles were in that business and how they were going to make it grow. And the more that alignment started to the gap between that alignment started to grow, it started to affect their ability to build the business and generate the revenue because they were always fighting in their alignment rather than being aligned together in order to do the things necessary to generate the business that they wanted to generate. So I think a lot of times alignment is key, not just within themselves, but within their purpose and their vision or their alignment with other people that they've established that business with. Um, and it could either hurt or help the revenue and the overall sustainability of the business if they were misaligned in the wrong kind of way.
Thinking about systems, we talked about systems thinking a little bit here. I mean, you can have systems in the accounting, accounts receivable, accounts payable. You can have it systems in the legal work, production, quality control, just all the different aspects of a business all have systems. That's why about 90% of every business is exactly the same. They all have the same business systems. They have to.
Right.
It's how those are managed, and then that 10% is the uniqueness of the organization. And a lot of times, owners will focus on that 10% that's unique, and not enough time on that systems throughout the business. There's a book back on the shelf here, and it's about business models. And there's probably 80 different models. So every time I'm talking with a new client or new prospect, it's like, all right, I'm working to understand their business, but then I start to figure out, okay, what business model does that relate to?
Mm.
And then how that business model can be refined to improve their outcomes. So at Enterprise Sage, we work across the entire ecosystem of an owner's life and their business. Your framework also looks at intentional, uh, how they're intentionally interconnected. So why is systems, as two systems thinking people, why is systems thinking so important?
Yeah, and I bring it back to our health and the fact that we have a tendency to become specialists, both in our business as well as the health industry, right? And so there's a statistic out there that says most people have at least 7 different specialists addressing their health issues. The challenge with that is every single specialist only focuses on one aspect of their health, one system, right? One person focuses on gastronomy, one focuses on respiratory, one focuses on nerves, one focuses on brain. They don't realize that what they do in the one affects all of the others, right? We don't take a holistic approach to the overall health of the body, just as we don't take a holistic approach to the overall health of the business. We have all of those individual systems that you talked about, but
Mm-hmm.
how often do we worry about whether those systems talk to and interact with each other in order to make sure that there's no overlap, there's no gaps, there's no problems that one system is going to cause the other? We normally don't take those things into account.
Reminds me of a couple of weeks ago, somebody asked me to describe Enterprise Sage and what we do. I was looking at a pie pan because we were having a restaurant. So, all right, you take a piece of pie, you take the whole pie, and you cut every other piece out. Well, one's your attorney, one's your CPA, one's the accountant, one's the sales. Okay. So they all have their expertise. They're all doing perfect in their slice of pie, but there's gaps between every one of those. And it's left up to the business owner to optimize how those pieces and parts connect. But they got their business to run.
And most of the time, we have no understanding of how they connect.
Right. It's kind of like in space. You get dark and you got matter, and then you got dark matter, right? Well, nobody knows quite what it is.
Exactly.
Um, so, why do you think so many owners optimize one area of life while unintentionally, I'll say, damaging or unintentionally disadvantaging themselves in others?
Right. Because they don't take the holistic systems view of what their life is all about. One of the things that I suggest for people to do at the end of every day is to
Hmm.
take some time to say, what did I accomplish today? What effect did it have? What effect does it have on the rest of my life? And what am I going to do tomorrow to make one small change that affects positively other aspects that I might be neglecting? And then we do that on a daily basis, and then we come back and do it on a weekly basis, on a monthly basis, so that we're focusing and spending time addressing the systems nature of our life. I call it block time. So you're spending
Hmm.
a block of time not doing anything, right? Not focused on problems, not reacting to situations, but just sitting there thinking about the effect of what I'm doing on my entire life. And is it resulting in what I want it to result in?
We take our clients through a similar exercise. One, we help them become aware of what's the true value of their time. We ask that for about 1 week a month for the first couple months, write down everything that you're working on in that week, and then figure out what you could delegate out to somebody else. That's pretty revealing once they realize the value of their time, and
Absolutely.
they start to get the monkeys off their back that way, delegate them out to other people, and start to be able to breathe and
Right.
just take the time. And then, all right, now let's block certain times. So on Monday afternoons, that's your accounting times. On Thursday mornings, that's your business development focus time. So instead of ad hoc or randomly focusing on those efforts. Let's bring a condensed block of time, an hour or two or three, to focus on those. And that way you're not immediately reacting. You're bringing the high level concentration and connectivity to that area of the business, and it produces better results.
Yeah,
Um,
I ask people three questions when I'm doing an exercise very similar to that. They take a look at everything that they're doing and they ask themselves, um, does this have to get done?
mhm.
Does it have to get done by me? Can it be done by somebody else and who? And does it ever have to get done? Because there are certain things that we focus our time on that will resolve themselves while we spend time on more important things.
So the things we're talking about here are universal acceptability. Um, that's a very sophisticated way of saying it. What do you think, or what did you learn from testing these concepts? Because you've been doing this for decades across different personality types, different industries, and different situations.
It was crucial for me as I was designing and developing our system that it be built on universal principles that can be applied anywhere. And so I would test everything in our system in every situation that I can possibly imagine. And here's what I found. Companies are successful or not successful. Large companies, small companies, our individual lives are successful or not successful because of the human component, right? And as a result of the fact that everywhere we go is the human component, I've found, believe it or not, that there's a finite number of issues that we as human beings deal with. And it doesn't matter the industry, it doesn't matter the company, it doesn't matter the size, it doesn't matter the dollar amount, it doesn't matter who we're dealing with. There are a finite number of issues that we deal with as human beings. And so, what I was successful, I think, in doing is designing a holistic system that no matter where you put that system, it works because it addresses all of the finite number of human dynamic issues that I find in the majority of places that I go.
All right. So one thing I found interesting about the information you're sharing here is the distinction between a reaction, response, and intentional action. Most people never separate those three.
So
Why is that distinction so important?
it's important because in reaction mode, we're out of control. We're giving control over to whatever we're reacting to, right? And no matter whether the outcome is good or bad from a reaction, the action that we take is bad, in my opinion, because the action is out of control. And if the outcome is good, we just got lucky that time, right? And so we have to, I believe, and it is very rare that I say we must or we have to, because I don't have the right to speak into somebody else's life and tell them what they have to do. But if they really want to get outcomes that are guaranteed, stable, sustainable, scalable, they have to induce thought and control into every action that they take. And now, once there's thought and control, the only question becomes, is it after the event or before the event? If it's after the event, then I have thought and control and I respond in the best way possible based on the circumstance that I'm in. If it's before the event, I can predetermine some ways to get a better outcome because I am not forced by time or circumstance into a particular action. I have the 12 seconds to look
Mhm.
ahead and think about what are 4 or 5 or 10 different ways that I can address this issue. And now I'm being intentional in control, and every action that I take is scalable and sustainable.
It's kind of reminded me of cybersecurity tabletop exercises. I used to be a chief information security officer, and once a year, the whole executive team went through the exercise or system outage exercises. You don't want it to happen and nobody know what to do, and you just start reacting. You want to know, here's
Right.
what the plan is. Here's how you escalate. Here's what we do. Yeah, the outcomes are very different.
They sure
Um,
are. I did a lot of work in manufacturing companies, for
mhm.
example, and most of the time, maintenance is seen as something that they have to do, right? And so they put it off as long as possible. And then when something breaks, they're either reacting or responding, most of the time reacting. But if you see maintenance as a key component of the scalable and sustainable nature of that business, you force issues that could cause breakdown in order to intentionally ahead of time determine what the best action is to either eliminate the problem or minimize its negative effect when it happens.
Being able to intentionally manage the results instead of just react to them.
You got
Uh,
it.
Joe, when I was reading through the information that you shared with me, and thank you for doing that, I learned a lot. You mentioned something about the learning zone, not the comfort zone, but the learning zone.
Right.
So, how do business owners know when they're stretching, you're stretching there, correctly versus creating destructive stress?
Yeah, I certainly understand that. The challenge that we have as we're growing our comfort zone and becoming comfortable in new areas or new aspects of our business is that we have a tendency to stretch too far, right? I call that the danger zone or the panic zone, to where when we get out there, we are so uncomfortable. We're in such uncharted waters that everything that we do is a reaction because we haven't taken the time to plan it out or think through what some of those challenges might be. And so when I help people enlarge their comfort zone, I tell them there's a process. And the process is that you take one step, small step outside of your comfort zone where you feel a little bit anxious, a little bit hesitant to where you don't stop doing it, but you sort of question yourself about it. But you still have one foot inside your comfort zone where there's some security. And then here's the main component: ensure there's a successful experience when you're outside your comfort zone. Because once you ensure there's a successful experience, when you do that again, you're not uncomfortable anymore. You now have enlarged your comfort zone to the place that you stepped out of. And the more we take that one small step outside with a little bit of security, ensuring that we have that successful experience, we are ever learning, ever growing, a little bit of hesitation, but we know that that discomfort is causing us to grow and succeed where it's not, the analogy I give is kids in a thunderstorm have a tendency to jump in their bed and pull the covers over their head, right? And
Yeah.
that's what we have a tendency to do when we're so far outside of our comfort zone and experience a bad experience. We jump back into our comfort zone, never to come out again, right? And so
Yeah.
that learning zone becomes so important because that's the place where we grow, and we grow with security at the same time as that little bit of hesitancy.
Reminds me of the saying, sometimes people get over their skis, or in the riding world, you got to ride your ride, right? Don't
That's
ride beyond
exactly
your skill
correct.
set.
Yep.
Yeah. Joe, many entrepreneurs are competitive or they're achievement oriented, right? Um, but not necessarily purpose oriented. What's the long term danger of that?
Yeah. Did I start my business just to make money, or did I start my business for a higher purpose? And as soon as we lose sight of that purpose, the only thing we focus on is the achievement to make ourselves feel good. And a lot of those achievements are financial. What we have a tendency to do in in focusing so much on that and running to that financial achievement is that we're running from other aspects of our life that don't give us that same feeling. What we do is to create problems and fires in those other areas of our life as we're striving for this achievement. And when we stop and go to those other areas of our life, now we've got problems, right? We've got communication issues or human relation issues or lack of fulfillment issues in the other areas of our lives, which we're spending, the majority of our time in.
Very insightful. How do purpose and values actually improve decision making in business? They kind of like function like anchors, like if a boat is anchored someplace. How do they improve that decision making in business?
Yeah, the question becomes, when I make this decision, is it in alignment and heading toward the purpose? Is it a stepping stone toward that purpose? That it's an easy, less stressful decision for me to make. If I see it as a stepping stone, I'm in a detour. Where is that detour leading me? And do I have a clear understanding of how to get back on track to my original purpose, my original vision? If I have a clear understanding of that map, the decision making becomes less stressful, less emotional, and more determined. Same thing with values. I had a woman, for example, in one of my programs who was a top salesperson for every company that she worked with. She was hired on to a new company, and within 2 months, she was at dead last among all the salespeople and could not understand why. We went through a series of questioning to find out that her boss was asking her to do things that violated one of her values. But because she had never identified that value, she didn't understand what was happening. But she avoided doing what the sales manager asked her to do, which affected her overall revenue gains, right? So she couldn't figure out what was happening. As soon as we helped her understand that those decisions that she was making on those sales calls violated her value system, she had a decision to make. Does she stay there in that company, violating her values and not achieving her revenue goals, or does she make a decision to leave and go to a company that aligned more with her values? She left, and in a month later, she was the top salesperson in the company that she went to.
That makes sense.
But she made that decision based on her value system.
So, Joe, I'm thinking if I'm an entrepreneur and I'm listening to the call, we're over an hour into this. A few more questions are coming to mind.
Sure.
I'm wondering, is this all just theory and BS, or is this actual stuff that works? For that, so just take the pause here. How would you how would you answer that for the entrepreneur that's listening to this?
Yeah. I would say that 35 years of experience in working with small businesses and large businesses, testing out every aspect of our system and seeing it work. I have not found anyone that has intentionally gone through our system in order to improve their business that has not gotten the results that they were looking for. In large businesses that I work with, I give a guarantee return on investment. So they're spending $100,000. I give them a certain guarantee. Either if we do not get it, I'll give you your money back or continue the experience until we do. And in 35 years, I haven't continued beyond or given any money back. So I think our system works, but it's a system like any other system. You can't treat it like a smorgasbord. You can't take one piece or two pieces of the system and throw away the rest because you don't think it works for you. You have to work the entire system. And when you do, you're guaranteed the results at the end.
So, for business owners listening today to this, whatever that day might be, they feel overwhelmed, they feel scattered. What's the first thing they should do?
Stop and think, right? They stop and think, why did I start this to begin with? Am I off track from that original purpose? And are my actions in the business intentional or reactionary? And
Okay,
those are the main things that I start every single business owner asking.
start with the basics. So, what are the signs? What are some of the signs that owners um, should just self-reflect and realize they're reactive instead of intentional?
So if they do their time logs and they find that most of their actions are in quadrant number one or quadrant number three, they know they're in reaction mode. If they are not, if they have set mile markers in their planning process, checkpoints along the way, and they are not meeting those checkpoints, then they know they're in reaction mode and not being intentional. If they have not created mile markers in their plan, they're reactionary instead of being intentional.
What's one exercise or framework that listeners could use immediately to improve clarity and decision making?
Yeah, so I would have them take a look at the last three impactful decisions that they made in their business, why they made them, how they made them, and what the outcome of those decisions were. And we can start analyzing very quickly whether they were reactionary responses or intentional, and then work backwards from there to find out why they decided to make the decisions that they did.
Okay. It can be lonely at the top. We've all heard that one.
That's for sure.
The owner of a company is not on an island, so there's people around them. What can owners do to determine that the people around them are truly aligned with the company's vision?
Yeah, it's an excellent question. The sixth driver of the intentional success system is the right people in the right place doing the right thing at the right time for the right reason. And so we have two aspects of that because sometimes we have people inside our business or influencing us outside of our business that are hindering us from getting where we want to go. They're holding us back, or they're adding negativity into our thinking, or they're causing us to be reactionary rather than responsive or intentional. So we have to take into account. I have a worksheet where I take people through who's in your life, what role do they play in your life, and what's the motivation for them to play that role in your life. And then the second part of that worksheet is what outcomes do you want in the business? What roles do you need for those outcomes to be? And who's not playing some of those roles? And how do you go get people to play those roles in your business? Because we have to make sure that every aspect of the business that's necessary is being accounted for, not by us, right? And if we don't have that team, we have a tendency to jump in, and then the business becomes personally dependent on us. So our job is to identify what roles need to be played in the business. Who do I have that can play those roles, and who don't I have, and how do I go out and find those people to play those roles for me?
Reminds me of the saying of make sure your team's pulling on the right rope and in the right direction, and they're all pulling in the same direction,
They're on
not
the right
different
bus,
directions.
in the right seat, going in the right direction.
You got it. If you could sit down with a business owner 5 years before their burnout, divorce, health collapse, a disappointing accident, what would you tell them to start doing differently immediately?
Is to take a look at all nine areas of their life, where their strengths are and where their restraints are, where their weaknesses are, where they haven't taken into account what they're doing and what effect is this having on all the other aspects of their life, and then what they're planning and what effect, if it's successful, it will have on those other areas of life. And if it's not successful, what effect is it going to have on those other areas of life? So we have to be systems thinkers from the very beginning in order to make sure that what we do works, it works intentionally, it's sustainable and scalable.
I'm just thinking of the five pillars here because Enterprise Sage, we focus on the more the financial aspect of it, and less so in people's head where your specialty is. What's your business worth? What could it be worth? What's the roadmap to make it worth more? How do you extract more wealth along the way as you own it? And how do you actually have it sell for more and actually have it sell? That's the five pillars that we focus on.
Right.
Wrap it up with the last one here. Maybe two more. For someone listening right now who feels successful on paper, but internally they just know something's off. What would you want them to remember from the conversation today?
That their life is a whole, not just a piece. In order for us to feel fulfilled, we have to feel successful in all of the areas of our life. And if we feel successful in one and not successful in others, or there are irritants in some of those other areas of life, or we may not focus at all on one or two other areas of life that will bring us more fulfillment. Some people don't spend time on the spiritual side. Some people don't spend time on the community side where they give back, right? So, Maslow's hierarchy of needs says that ultimately we want to get to the place where we are ultimately fulfilled in every aspect of our life, right? And so I think that in order for us to be able to get there, we have to take into account every aspect of our life and be a little bit more intentional about each one.
A little bit more intentional, or a lot more intentional.
Depending.
Um,
And that's a major or minor change for most people. Intentionality is opposite of the way that we are normally hardwired. So when I talk to people about being intentional, I tell them, for you, this may be a minor change. For you, it may be a substantial change. And then we have to address how people deal with change. Some people resist change. Some people acquiesce to it. Some people dive in with both feet. We have to take that part of their life into account. Because if I'm asking them to make a major change in their life and they're resistant, anything I try to teach them in the system isn't going to work
yeah,
until I slowly bring them along.
just thinking about, we all, or almost all of us, have situations where somebody said something that made an impact on our life and it just stuck in our head, or you want to provide advice to somebody. Something that somebody said to you one time that just stuck in your head or was impactful to you, or impactful advice that you'd like to share, or both.
Yeah, I had a mentor of mine who helped me really understand that people are going to react to things that you say to them or things that you suggest to them. And that initial reaction is not ultimately where they really desire to be. It is their emotional feeling about having to deal with changing something in their life, and that's uncomfortable, right? And so we can't react to their reaction because we create this chain reaction that never is successful for anybody, right?
Yeah.
So we have to have some insight into the person to find out, is this just the uncomfortable nature that they feel every time that they're confronted with a change in their life? And we have to become much more empathetic and much more sympathetic to those things before we run in to try to make those changes for people.
Good advice. Joe, anything else for today?
I think that's it. I think the important thing for people to understand is intentionality is not an automatic thing that you run into and say, okay, I'm intentional now. This is a system that takes a lot of thought, a lot of change, a lot of difficulty, but it is certainly worthwhile because I believe that we become more purposeful, more passionate, more peaceful, and more powerful as individual people when we become more intentional.
So, Joe, the name of your company is Intentional Achievements. How should people get a hold of you?
Intentionalachievements.com. And then on our website is a contact button if they want to contact me on WhatsApp. My WhatsApp number is there. And my email address is very simple, joe@intentionalachievements.com.
Excellent, Joe. I appreciate the time that you spent with us today. Thank you, everyone. Hit the like button if you would, and come back and join us again for another interesting and informative podcast. Thank you, Joe. Appreciate you coming on today.
Thank you, Craig. Appreciate you.